Okay, so this is a review for Wolverine and the X-Men Volume 1, which is written by Jason Aaron with art by Chris Bachalo and Nick Bradshaw. I'm reviewing this first volume with two major points in mind before I get to actually reviewing the story of this. Number one, I did not actually buy this. I refused to buy this on the grounds simply because of what the second point will be. I'm strictly reviewing the first four single issues that I have because Marvel has taken it upon themselves to decide to release a hardcover of the first four issues, but asking $15 or $16 for it, which is just utterly ridiculous. This is kind of a trend that I've started noticing with them. I think they released the first volume of the new Uncanny X-Men like this, and they've been doing it with Uncanny X-Force too, which is precisely the reason why I have not bought that series in trade yet. Mainly on the ground that I absolutely refuse to pay $15 for four issues, because normally I would pay, at least 18, 19 for a hardcover trade that had 6 issues to it, but that's a little too much to me. Somebody did the math on Amazon when they were reviewing this. This is like 11 cents a page, which is ridiculous. So there is that drawback to it. I wouldn't really recommend buying this series unless they put out a better trade to it, or unless that they put out an omnibus to it, which will probably be better. Which your money will be better spent once that comes along. So that's just my little mini rant out of the way, and hopefully this is not a trend that will start bleeding over into the other trades. Stop that crap with Uncanny X-Force, the X-Men, and this, and just stick to the standard 6 issues a trade, and everything will be fine. Now on to the actual review of this. So this starts the whole blue team, gold team crap for all of the X-Men titles, which is basically the fallout of a pseudo X-Men Civil War. Now, while I enjoyed the Schism story in itself, I will admit that the basis of the argument in between Wolverine and Cyclops, once it finally hits in that story, is less than perfect. Okay, it's not less than perfect, it does suck. But they're writing Wolverine now as if he's the higher man out of Marvel, and Cyclops, he's written as a douchebag, and they're doing that simply to make him the bad guy in the stories. But they're totally not calling bullshit on Wolverine for his hypocrisy, which is completely daunting to me. Basically what happens with this story is that we're picking up after Schism left off, and Wolverine, Beast, Kitty Pryde, Rogue, and Iceman take all the mutants that wanted to follow them to Westchester and reopen the Xavier Institute as the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. And we have the Kid Hellfire Club basically tormenting them throughout this story, or at least for the first 3 issues. The high point of the story is Aaron's writing, in the regard that I had no idea that he had this completely hysterical side to him. Because especially after reading some of the stuff with Scout, the run that he did on Wolverine before Cullen Bunn and Loeb took over, and even a lot of his stuff with Punisher Max. Wolverine and the X-Men is essentially the X-Men meeting a Tom and Jerry cartoon. It's campy, it's hilarious, absolutely all hell breaks loose in every silly sense of the word. The majority of the students that they focus on in this, we have Idie, who left Generation Hope. We have a Brood child who is introduced, who seems to have some sort of a mutation in the regards that he's not as aggressive as the rest of his alien species. We have Kid Gladiator. We have a Warbird as his bodyguard, and we have Quentin Quire, who is kept under constant surveillance under Wolverine. And everything that can go wrong in the story, either thanks to the Hellfire Club's sabotage of the school, or just through sheer and utter bad luck, breaks out in this, and it's completely hysterical to read about. There's problems with a giant Krakoa, which they've found, who's like some kind of descendant of the original one from Giant Size X-Men, who's actually trying to swallow the school. There's interdimensional portal, which is trying to suck the school into some portion of the negative zone that Beast is trying to fix. There are these BAMPs running around, causing havoc everywhere. And there are two inspectors from the Board of Education who actually have to come and certify that the school is good enough to be run for the public. And it's, oh my god, this stuff is completely hysterical. Thanks to the sabotage, things go completely wrong. Wolverine is trying to keep everything sane for the inspectors, and he's practically tearing his hair out, trying to keep everything from going wrong. There's even at one point in this story that Caden Kilgore actually fires a couple of darts at the inspectors, and they turn into these knockoff versions of the Wendigo and Sauron and start tearing up the school, and everything just completely goes downhill. And Quire, who actually surprisingly has a solution to everything on hand, and he's not even noticed for it at the end of the story, is completely hysterical. The fourth issue of this series is pretty good in its own right. I'm not going to talk about it too much because it's an alright standalone issue, but I will say that Nick Bradshaw's art in that issue is a vast improvement over Bachalo's from the first three issues. I like Bachalo's artwork, at least with Wolverine and the X-Men. It's much more detailed, and you can kind of halfway make out what's going on with it, whereas unlike where I read the shed art from Amazing Spider-Man, where I couldn't tell half of what was going on over there. And unfortunately, there's kind of this thing that goes on in the later issues where Bachalo and Bradshaw are constantly swapping up on the artwork, which is kind of an annoyance I'm going to address later on, with constantly swapping artists around in certain stories. But his artwork is much more improved. It's a little bit cartoony, but it's much better that you can tell what's going on with it as opposed to Bachalo's. And I think really the thing that I have to complain about with issue 4 is probably the appearance of Sabretooth at the end of that issue. Mostly because he meets up with the Hellfire Club at the end of that story, and then once the later issues come along, he's never seen in it, which practically bugs the crap out of me, although I do know that much later on, Wolverine and the X-Men will be much more connected with what's going on in the solo Wolverine title and with Uncanny X-Force. So these books, at least up under the side banner, will be bouncing off of each other pretty well. But it will be kind of an annoyance if you're not at least keeping up with what's going on in the other books. So this is kind of a backdrop to it. Overall, the story is good, and I would recommend picking it up. But for now, only stick with those first 4 back issues or simply read it in the store. Do not spend money on a pathetic volume which has been a first release to this series.